Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is Mario Monicelli's Big Deal in Madonna Street from 1958, starring Marcello Mastrioanni, Claudia Cardinale, Toto, and Vittorio Guzman, or Gassman. This is probably Monicelli's most famous film. I only watched my first Monicelli fairly recently, The Organizer, which I also did a random review on, because it's wonderful. Also starring Mastrioanni. And very much like that film, Big Deal on Madonna Street is not a Mastrioanni star vehicle. He is just part of an ensemble. He gives a wonderful performance, as you'd expect. But this is a very interesting film in the sense that it's a heist film, it's a caper film, but it's almost a satire of the heist films that preceded it, especially when you think of Rififi and these heist films that have professionals and skilled thieves and burglars, and they're very precise and very scientific. And then the films that would follow, which are kind of more caper films where comedy is involved, or it's more a group of kind of bungling thieves or amateurs. So it's kind of an interesting film that may have been one of the first kind of caper films as far as heists with comedy, because it is a very funny film. It's probably one of the funniest films I've seen for a while, which might not speak to the film, it might just speak to the films that I've been watching. But it's also very much like The Organizer. Is absolutely wonderful. I would say it's not as great as The Organizer, but it's still close to being a 5-star film. It's just absolutely wonderful. So it opens up with this veteran thief and his lookout who's trying to break into a car, and the alarm goes off. He's chased by the police and caught and sent into prison. And while he's in prison, he gets word of this amazing job involving this safe which contains jewels, but to get into it you can get in through the adjacent apartment, which has a very thin partition wall, and the apartment is abandoned, so it's going to be fairly straightforward for a big payday. But he's in prison, so he gets word to his mall, MOLL, not MALL, that they're looking for a patsy to say they broke into the car so he can get out and do this big job and make lots of money. So what follows is a wonderful way to introduce the characters that would appear in the film, as his associates go from one potential patsy to the next potential patsy, and as they go they're added to the group. So eventually they find this boxer who thinks he's going to be a champion, but he's more like a chumpion, and he ends up going to the prison to admit that he did it to get this other guy off, and he'll get paid a certain amount of lira for doing that. This is long before the euro. But the governor obviously doesn't buy the story, so he locks both of them up. And then the boxer is given a sentence, and he comes back to the yard and he tells the veteran thief that he's been put away for 3 years, and he's really upset and he's really distraught. And the veteran kind of tells him his plan of what the job is, because before he was very reticent, so somebody else might steal the plan. But seeing this guy is now in for 3 years, and there's a chance he's going to get out sooner than that, he tells him the plan. But then, of course, the boxer's actually having him on. He's just going to get probation, so he's going to go out. So he goes out and gets the guys that were helping find the patsy, and they do the job. So obviously the veteran is furious, and when he comes out later, he's obviously upset and wants to get his revenge because it's against courtesy. But there's also wonderful little subplots going on. So one of the crew is very protective of his sister, played by a very young, almost unrecognisable Claudia Cardinale. I actually had to double take that it is Claudia Cardinale, because obviously Once Upon a Time in the West, for example, is 10 years later, and she's maybe more famous for work in the 60s and beyond than in the 50s. Granted, this was 58. And another member of the crew who loves his mother, just like all good Italian boys do, he's intrigued by, because the rumour is she's so ugly, that's why she's locked up in the house all the time, but the brother's actually just protecting her from men. So the other member of the crew eventually sees Claudia Cardinale, and then they start having feelings for each other. So you've got that dynamic of the brother protecting his sister, but then the other one of the crew is obviously seeing her by pretending that he's the brother and he's forgotten his keys. You have this veteran safecracker played by Toto, who comes and gives advice for a price and then leaves them to it. This film was pretty much remade in 2002 by the Russo brothers, who went on to do lots of Avenger films, including the 2 Captain America films and Endgame and stuff like that, which had an ensemble cast including George Clooney. And I don't think I've seen it all the way through. It just triggered with me because there's a scene on the rooftop when the safecracker is showing the crew or giving the crew tips, and it just kind of flashed back to me. That was pretty much scene for scene in Welcome to Collinwood. So it is a great ensemble. They've each got their own little quirks. So Mastrioanni's character, his wife's in prison, so he's left looking after a baby because they don't want the baby in prison with the wife, even though there's facilities, because they don't want growing up in prison. So Mastrioanni is literally left holding the baby. Again, it's not a star turn by Mastrioanni. He's very funny. At one point, I won't tell you how, but at one point he has a broken arm, so he's constantly walking about with a splint on his arm. Again, the boxer, who kind of becomes the de facto leader of the gang, obviously he thinks he's far smarter than he perhaps is. Again, we're not laughing, well, we are kind of laughing at them, but we're also, they are endearing, so you're not just like coldly laughing at them, because the plan, which was simple, as we know in cinema, it gets complicated because the apartment that was supposed to be empty is actually got 2 old women in it, and they have their niece, who's pretty much their maid, or at one point she says pretty much their slave. So therefore the boxer ends up romancing her to try and get her out of the house. The 2 old women go to relatives every Thursday night, so they do have a window where the flat is going to be empty. So you have that subplot going on. You have the subplot between one of the gang and the other gang's sister. Um, a lot of non-English language films, or in general films from other countries, sometimes the humour can be local. Some of the humour doesn't translate depending what country you're watching it in. But I would say the humour in Big Deal and Madonna Street is pretty much universal. It's very funny. There's actually touching moments as well. And again, because it's that phrase of comedy Italian style, we kind of know what that means, as far as they may be like tragedy or accidents or deaths, or we might not have perfect resolution, but in this case it's perfect for the film. So it is a wonderful film, and it's fascinating for looking back at heist films which feature, dedicated professionals. And again, we think of Rififi with that silent scene where they're actually doing the robbery, and everything is calculated and everything's perfect. We still have the cliches of the heist movie in Big Deal and Madonna Street, as far as watching the egress and ingress of the flat, looking at when the night watchman appears, timings and all of that. But as usual, things go wrong, and that's where it enters, or it's a template for the caper film, which it's a bit of a lighter touch. It's a bit more humour based than your classic heist films, and this is a wonderful kind of cross point between the two kind of subgenre of the crime film. It's got a wonderful score. Everything about it is just, it's light and breezy, even though, because it's comedy Italian style, there's still like moments of tone shifts to something a little darker. The overall kind of theme of this bunch of guys is, it's better doing this than actually having to work for a living, which appears near the end of the film, which again makes a wonderful point about Italian society at that time in the 50s. It's just so good. Mastrioanni, again, he doesn't give a showy performance. Again, everyone's with his eyes, reacting to other people. Again, I'm not going to go into the plot points as when we get nearer to actually the break-in, but there's just so much to enjoy in this film. It should put a smile on your face. If it doesn't put a smile on your face at some point, there's maybe something wrong with you. You even put a smile on my face, so that's saying something. It's just an absolute joy. And I've only seen two Monicelli films, and they've both been wonderful. They're both now random reviews, which is obviously a high benchmark for a film to make it into one of my random reviews. Sadly, I don't think it's on Blu-ray. This is an Asian import DVD. I think it is available on the Criterion channel, if you're lucky to have that, or has been available in the Criterion channel. But it's another absolutely wonderful film. There's a tie-in relating to food, which again I can't really explain. But at the start of the film, there's a reference to food that's being served in the prison, and later in the film that really resonates in a later scene, which I can't really tell you about. You're going to have to watch it. But there's so many little character beats. The characters are engaging. It's just wonderful. You root for them even though they're not perhaps the sharpest tack in the box. But it's just an absolute blast. Like I said, it'll put a smile on your face, and sometimes during these dark times, you do need a film that will put a smile on your face. So that's Mario Monicelli's Big Deal in Madonna Street from 1958. It's wonderful. You can let me know in the comments if you've seen it and what you think about it. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.